Okay, so let's have a conversation about what to look for in regards to lens quality. By now, we all know about lens aperture, and we know that the lower the number, the more light that gets let in. And normally that means it's a more expensive lens for a lower number. But there's a lot more qualitative measures than just the f-stop alone. So let's consider aperture number one. Number two, let's look at focal length. So sometimes the manufacturing process of a lens is much simpler just based on the focal length that it is. So 50 mil, for example, you notice a lot of 50 mil lenses. You can get like an f1.8 aperture for probably 100 and change for a half decent Canon lens. And now I know half decent is a relative term, but still, there are a lot of lenses out there for a cheaper price that happen to be 50 mil, and that's just because the manufacturing process is not that complicated compared to other lenses. Like 35 mil, for example, you'll find that they are normally a lot more expensive than 50 mil lenses. I won't get into, nor do I probably know all the details of why a 35 mil is more expensive than 50 mil. I just know that it has to do with the manufacturing process as one major contributor. So when you're on a budget, sometimes maybe you'll make that compromise. You can get a high quality 50 mil for considerably cheaper than you can get a high quality 35 mil. So that's one qualitative measure to think about. Number three is light refraction. Now, I find that on the older, like say these old Minolta lenses, Pentax lenses, all these old lenses that you can find on Craigslist, Kijiji, wherever you find your used products, eBay, you'll find that, they're vintage lenses, they're all interesting, but a lot of times you get a lot of light refraction, which means the elements are aligned in such a way that light bounces in and then it bounces around in there way too much. So you've got a very washed out, very low contrast lens. So you have a hard time getting a crisp looking image because other than actual sharpness, the perceived sharpness is a lot of times contributed to contrast. And if your lens is incapable of contrast because when it receives any kind of light into it, it's refracting light around inside the elements. That's just either a poor quality lens, or maybe it's an old lens that used to be decent quality, but it has gone out of alignment. And in order to send it off to a lens tech, if one even exists for that old lens you have, it would cost way more than just buying a new lens. So there's those considerations. But there might be other reasons why you want those vintage lenses. But again, that's another qualitative measure. So you figure out what it is that matters to you, but at least you know these are the things to look at. We've looked at f-stop, the focal length, choices can make a difference in price versus quality, and light refraction now. Again, I find it's more of an issue with some of these older vintage lenses, but that's a thought. So number four, vignetting. Now there's the obvious vignetting, like if you adapt an old lens, or even on newer lenses, if you got like an APS-C size lens and you put it on a full frame camera, you'll see dark vignetting around the edges. But on poor quality lenses alone, sometimes you just see darkened edges, even when it is, if you have an APS-C lens, you buy an APS-C lens and you put it on an APS-C camera and you still see the vignetting. That could be due to just a poor quality lens. So it's just something to look for. If you're going to crop in, like say you're shooting in 4K and you're going to deliver in 1080p, you shoot a little wider. For the uber professional, that's not even an option. I understand you're not going to do that. But when we're trying to adapt old lenses for stylistic reasons or even for budgetary reasons, sometimes it's just good to know what the little qualitative measures are, and then you can make slight adjustments, whether it's in post or in just the way that you shoot it, to deal with those things so that they aren't a problem and they look more like a creative choice than a technical problem. Number five, and this is a huge one, but it's one that's very rarely ever talked about in the mid-range to amateur world, and that is focus roll-off. And if this is your first time hearing about this, what it is, and this, I'm shooting on a very crappy lens right now, and you may not see it in this particular shot, but where things are in focus to as things are completely out of focus behind me, which is probably not that drastic in this particular shot, but there should be a graduation of in focus, slightly more out of focus, slightly more out of focus, slightly more. And the way that it rolls off into the blurred out areas of the image, that roll-off quality, how smooth that transition is, you'll find that with higher quality, more expensive lenses generally, you're going to see a very nice roll-off. But when you are buying a budget lens, it's something to look for. If you notice that things are just a direct, they look like a cutout, that is just such an undesirable look, and it looks like you're shooting it with a cell phone or you're shooting with a very, very cheap point and shoot camera. I'm shooting on the M50 here, and there's one thing I wanted to mention about the M50, and I don't know why Canon did it. They've shipped probably the worst lens I've ever seen them manufacture. It is a sharp lens, but this is a perfect example of the different qualitative measures that you got to think about, because it is a sharp lens, and it doesn't have vignetting. It is a higher f-stop lens. It's a 15 to 45, f3.5 to f4.5, depending on where you are in that zoom range. And for whatever reason, they've decided to ship this particular lens with this camera. Now, it is a cheap camera, so maybe that's why. But I find that the quality of this camera far exceeds what this lens can do. Like if you put a much better quality lens on here, and I'm going to put a slightly better quality lens on here. I don't have with me today. I don't have a super expensive lens. But the big thing about a lens like this is it creates that real cutout look. And the roll-off is the biggest problem with this lens that I find. So if you are shooting outside and you're able to shoot at the lower aperture, the 3.5, because you're getting a wider shot, you'll notice that it's still, you can't get away from that cutout look, from what's in focus to what's out of focus. And the bokeh on it as well, it just looks very grainy. Like the aperture blades inside, I don't know the number of blades that they have. I'm just not a fan of the look of this lens. So if you happen to have this camera and this lens kit, because it is the kit lens that a lot of people buy with this particular camera, you can upgrade the quality of your footage quite a bit just by upgrading to a half decent lens. Okay, so let's talk about number 6, sharpness and resolution. Again, if you're picking up vintage lenses, you'll find that the resolution, they were never intended for 4K type footage, so they will always be a little softer than you're used to, which is also, it makes it very hard to focus. There is the focus throw thing, which I actually didn't put on this list as well. So focus throw is how much you can turn the lens before it's in focus. So if your adjustments are very long, a long throw, that's really good, because then you can really dial in focus to perfection there. But when it's very short, and a lot of photography lenses versus cinema style lenses are notorious for being extremely long throws. Like you'll just spin it all the way around to find focus on things. And that's a good thing for you, because then you can really nail focus. And this really comes down to the quality of the optics. Now, this whole list is just to give you a quick reference of some of the things to look for. Expensive lenses will have better workmanship generally, and also reputation. When you hear about a particular lens that everybody's buying, you can kind of go with the crowd on this one, but you do need to dole out the bucks. If you get your hands on a lens looking for resolution, consider that old vintage lenses never really considered that there would be 4K or above type footage, so they will generally be a little softer than you're used to, and even a cheaper, newer lens. And you know that they were manufactured after 4K was invented or above, so generally the resolution should be there, but it's just something to look for. So number 7 is color and contrast. And I know they're two different things, but a lot of that has to do with the coatings that are on the lenses, among many other details. The whole lens world, it's a huge rabbit hole. I'm trying to give you a very simplified version of things here, because you're going to probably have to make compromises if you're on a budget, and it's just good to know what the issues are. And that's the great thing about understanding what to look for, so that you can specifically decide, instead of someone just telling you, oh, you got to spend big bucks, period. That's end of story. Or don't get that lens because it's crap. Well, why is it crap? Because the thing that makes it crap might not actually be an issue for you. It might actually be desired. It might be an artistic choice. The way it lends flares, when you get flares through that refraction thing we were talking about. That might be something you're looking for on some very artistic music video or something like that. And it might be something you go to in your camera bag more often than not in your particular thing. So overall, and this is not one of the items on the list, but when we're talking about cinema lenses versus photography lenses, there's a huge difference there. We talked about the focus throw is one major thing. Obviously, actual cinema lenses, because there's a lot of lenses out there that have the name, they've branded their product as a cinema lens, and when you find out more about the manufacturing process sometimes, or even just the overall quality of the lens, you end up finding out that it's basically a photography lens that they've put some gears on. Doesn't really make it a real cinema lens. And when you look at the price tag of some of these lenses, $20,000, $40,000 more even than that, that you see in the actual camera packages on Arri and some of the bigger red packages. Sony Venice, any lenses they would put on cameras of that caliber, you'll find that it's amazing at how much more everything you get, better color, better resolution, everything. And it in so much, as good as those sensors are, as good as the technology in those cameras are, they're obviously spending $20,000-$40,000 on a lens, or $100 and some odd $1,000, sometimes a couple $100,000 for a lens package for a reason, because the lenses matter that much. Now, even when you've got a $500, $1,500, $3,000 or $4,000 camera, like these mirrorless that so many people are using these days, just considering, maybe you're not obviously going to go to a $20,000 lens, but just knowing these different things that you can consider might help you make a better informed decision. But hopefully this list points out the various aspects that make up quality, and the quality is just not one thing, and quality is not only based on price. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. If it was, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button and don't forget the notification bell so you don't miss out on these videos. There's lots more videos on the way, so I'll see you in the next one, and thank you so much for watching.